Hello, everybody. Hello, and welcome to Side Hustle Ideas. I'm Bill, a company's expert. Thank you for joining me today. And today we are talking about side hustles. This is the weekly live stream that I do where we talk about entrepreneurship and side hustles and starting a business and all that kind of thing. Absolutely fascinating topic. I totally encourage people to learn as much as they possibly can about this topic. It may just be your key to success. The title of this week's episode is called Dream of Working for Yourself? Your first step starts here. And as the title suggests, this is a live Q&A. So we're going to be talking about this, but if you're seeing my face, as always, you should see a chat box somewhere in the vicinity of my face. Get in the chat box. If you are a subscriber to my channel for any amount of time, you should be able to get in there and ask me questions. What you're wondering about. And as always, with this live stream, I would recommend everybody to put a side hustle idea suggestion of yours in the chat, and we can discuss it. Yeah. So this is episode number 89. So yeah, let's get started here. I just came off a few phone calls, so I'm a bit just trying to shift gears. To get into this, I gotta adjust my cameras a bit there. Everything's kind of been bumped around a little. You always love that. It was the weekend and then it wasn't again, so we're back. And I'm located in Winnipeg, Canada. We have a very wide temperature swing between the winter and the summer. It gets incredibly cold in the winter. It gets incredibly hot in the summer. So we had about 1 week of half decent temperatures, and now it's like plus 30 degrees Celsius, which is like very, very hot. So I'm still adjusting to it. Silver Evans is here. Silver Evans says, hello, Mr. Company Expert. Sorry, I don't know your name. My name is Bill. You can call me Bill. How are you today? I'm doing fine. It's a beautiful sunny day. And I'm here. I'm live. We're talking about entrepreneurship. One of my favorite topics. You know, there's a lot of things that I wish I had known when I was younger. You know, you find out stuff too late in life sometimes. And this is one of the things that I wish I had been turned on to when I was before I was 20 years old. You know, I'd have loved to make use of this information and the awareness of this, in my 20s. And I didn't. I got into it maybe in my late 20s, I think. Somewhere in there. It's all kind of a blur in a past life. But yeah, I would have loved to use this because any creative effort that you have, usually when you're young, you have ideas about what you want to do and what you like to do, right? And there's usually some creativity there. At least there was in my case. I think a lot of people are in that boat. And, the idea that, you have a hobby or you have a passion, which might be different from, your career or something. At least it was for me in the beginning. But knowing a bit about entrepreneurship, what it means is that you can do your hobby or your passion, whatever it is that you're enthusiastic about, or, some kind of creative thing, and you can make money off it. That's the whole idea, you can turn something into a money-making venture. So if it's something you want to do, it's an incredible prospect. You could do what you love plus make money from it. To me, that's absolutely fantastic. So that's why I encourage people to get into this. If you know how to take something and you know how to make money off it directly without needing an employer, right? Absolutely liberating, and it opens up a whole kaleidoscope of possibilities for you in terms of your career or, ideas of what you could do. Even if it's kind of what we're talking about today, which are side hustles, where it's not your main line. So a lot of people, they'll go get a day job. They'll go get a sort of full-time vocation. That's what pays the bills, right? But on the side, they can supplement their income by doing something else, right? And it's really cool if it's something else that you really enjoy. So if you were doing a hobby before, right, you can keep your hobby and turn it into a side hustle. So in a way, you're not really changing too much of your lifestyle. You're still doing the things that you were doing before. It's just that your hobby is becoming a money-making thing. Now, for some people, this is an incredible thing. For others, it may not work for them. Sometimes you just want to keep your hobby as a hobby. Simple. You do it entirely on your own terms. But, for other people, they want to really get into whatever it is, their hobby, their passion, and they want to do more of it. They want to learn everything they can about it, and they just love it. This can be a sort of thing that they want to tack on. Yes, welcome to Silver Evans. Glad you could join. There's 15 people here, so thank you for listening. Okay, let's get into it. Now, as I said, this is a Q&A, and today, if we had more people asking questions, that would suit me fine, because I didn't do too much preparation for this episode. But I mean, I know a lot about this stuff, so we can talk all about it. First of all, just for people that are coming into this, what is a side hustle? A side hustle is something you do on the side. Okay, so you have your day job. That's what you do, presumably 8 hours a day through the week, something like that. It may vary. You might have shift work. You might have weird days off, whatever. But your main thing that you do, okay? And then a side hustle is something that brings in money that you do on the side. It's not part of your day job. It has nothing to do with your employer, okay? And basically, what you need to engage in, or what you need to learn to do this, is entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship is one subject within the world of business. Okay, so some people go to school and they learn this. Other people, they just sort of dive in and do it themselves, which you can do to a degree. I'm always from the side that recommends you learn the theory. You learn how business works before you try to do business. Like anything else, if you want to be a welder, it helps if you go take a course and learn how to use the welding equipment and how welding works and what tools there are and what materials there are and what the techniques are. Usually helps, or alternatively, you could just buy a welder from the local hardware store and then just get cracking. You know what I mean? A lot more dangerous, a lot more interesting, I suppose, because weird things may happen. But you technically can do it that way too, right? Silver Evans says, I managed to get an interview later today, just to refresh. Don't ask about pay or benefit. Okay, well, we're not talking about getting a job here. This is not the live stream for that. This is about side hustles. So if you have any questions to do with side hustles or entrepreneurship or careers or anything like that, making money directly, that's what we're here to talk about. Okay, so that's a side hustle. We kind of defined it. Usually it helps if you learn the theory before, but, not necessarily. Like the thing that I'm talking to you over YouTube, people become YouTubers, people, they make money off it. It's like, that's a form of entrepreneurship. That's exactly what entrepreneurship looks like. Other people, they do like Etsy or something like that. If you've never been to Etsy, it's an online store, kind of like Amazon, but it's more, as I understand, it's more like arts and crafts type thing. So if you can create little things out of wood or plastic or construction paper or plaster of Paris, papier-mâché, whatever that is, in your home or in your garage or something, and then you sell it online, you have like an online store on Etsy, or I suppose Amazon or any eBay, that kind of stuff. Those are forms of entrepreneurship, right? How much money do you have to spend to start those? Not very much, like the YouTube thing, for example. Technically you don't have to spend any money on YouTube. You have to be able to make videos. So if you have a smartphone or something like that, that really helps. And connection to the internet really helps too. But, like beyond that kind of stuff, it's not like you need to drop $100,000 or something like to start a business. That's not how this stuff works. These are well-known standard side hustles in this day and age, right? So there's one fallacy that you have to spend a lot of money to be in business. Not necessarily. Now you can certainly do that if you want, right? If you wanted to own a bookstore, like a little mom and pop bookstore, obviously you have to drop some cash to somehow obtain that bookstore. Usually, either you lease the space or you buy a business or, whatever. So yes, you can spend a lot of money to have your own business, but my the point I'm trying to make is that you don't necessarily have to. There are businesses out there that, it costs very little to nothing to start up. Okay, so that's the first thing. Because whenever I talk about this stuff, I always get people like chiming in with that. Like it's false. You don't need to drop a ton of cash to start a business. You just don't. There are many ways of starting businesses. I'd say like there's almost an infinite amount of different ways to start a business, depending on the type of business, depending on how you decide to do it, and depending on what you do, it's not necessarily better to drop a bunch of cash. It's called the initial capital outlay. It's not necessarily better in absolute terms to do it that way. You can spend a ton of money starting a business and then lose it all, or you could spend nothing and either it goes nowhere, or you could spend nothing and it just takes off. Depends what you're trying to do. So that's kind of what everyone needs to know who's interested in this. The other thing that I wish I could create some awareness around is that this is a viable career path for a lot of people. A lot of us, we are conditioned from when we are young to think that when we grow up and then we have to make money, there's only one option of how to do that, and that's to get a job. Now, I'm not knocking getting a job. Yes, that is a method that works for probably most people. But this idea that that's what you have to do and there's no other alternative, that's plainly false. This is one of the options you have before you, to be an entrepreneur. You become your own boss. You make money directly without having to be in partnership with an intermediary, namely an employer, who helps you to turn your value into money, right? You see, a lot of people, they don't know how to turn their own value into money, so they figure, okay, I'm going to partner with an employer. Now, the employer does know how to turn my value into cash. Okay, they employ me. I follow their instructions. I do the work that they tell me to do, and then the company makes money, and then they give some of it to me, right, in my pay. You know what I mean? Now, for a lot of jobs, that makes perfect sense. It's an unrealistic expectation that person would have to then learn business, to convert their own value into cash for themselves. You know what I mean? It's not necessary. Maybe they're a specialist. Maybe they're a medical doctor, or they fly aircraft, like whatever. They're airline pilots, whatever. Do they need to know how to do that themselves? Probably not. But there's a lot of other people that, you can either work for an employer doing a skill that you have, or you could do that same skill by yourself and turn it into cash directly. Earlier, a few minutes ago, I mentioned welder. There's an example of that. You could certainly work as a journeyman welder in a company that needs welding work. Maybe it's manufacturing or industrial services, something like that, right? Or you could just become a freelance welder. Now, either you could create your own products that you sell. You do some welding at home, you create a product, you sell it, or you become some kind of contractor that does like welding out in the field, and then you're your own boss. You just, do gig work and stuff like this. People hire you to work on projects, and then when you're done the project, you move on to work with a different contractor, right? So there's ways of being able to make money on your own. This is what a lot of people do. On the small scale or on the large scale. The other thing is that we have in the economy, we have all different sizes of business, right? You got big businesses, you got medium-sized businesses, you got small businesses. Small businesses, they can be one person, right? Where I am in Canada, they define small business as anything less than 500 employees. So if you have less than 500 employees in your entire company, you are technically a small business and you're lumped into that category. I believe it works very similar in the United States. What you might think of as small business is actually, it includes that plus things that are a lot larger that you wouldn't have thought are small business, right? But in the grand scheme of things, they are. And the thing is that you have large businesses, their purpose is to solve large problems. They don't solve small problems because the small problems don't make sense for them to solve. It's too much work for too little payoff. They're only interested in solving the big problems because those are the ones that will really have a payoff for them, that they need, like a big payoff, right, to justify their size and their scale. Small business exists to solve, oh God, that's a tongue twister. Small business exists to solve small problems. And there's a lot of small problems around. You know what I mean? And you don't have the larger players looking at those or competing for those. They're off the radar for large players. So that leaves a lot of small work that's out there for small business. Now, a common thing that I've seen where a common mistake people fall into, and some of that crowd that insists that you have to drop huge piles of cash to start, a small business, an entrepreneurial venture. One of the reasons they think that is because they're making a mistake where they're trying to tackle a larger problem, but they're trying to do it in a small business. That's one of the reasons they feel they have to spend so much. I've seen that a lot of times too. It's pretty much almost always doomed to failure. It's like, you're not a big business. You can't do this with like 2 or 3 people. You need like a big company to do that properly. Trying to do it at the small scale doesn't work. Anyway, get in the chat. There are 26 people here. 26 people. Thank you for being here. You guys are awesome. This is primarily a Q&A, so get in the chat. You should see the chat box or chat field. If you are a subscriber, let me know what you're wondering about. I will do my best to answer your question. That's primarily why I do these. It's so I can interact with people. I really don't have much of a monologue today, so if we could get some questions, I will feed off the questions and we'll do it that way. Okay, now, whenever they talk about side hustles, there's always this thing where people say, well, what are the popular side hustles, right? And I did that. I did like an internet search. What are the popular side hustles? And they're like really low end stuff. So like, this is what I came up with, right? So freelance writing, virtual assistant, print on demand, Etsy or digital products, tutoring, social media management. That one's actually kind of interesting. Affiliate marketing, ride share or delivery, photography, or selling on eBay/Facebook marketplace. So these are like really low end stuff, and they're things that, well, with the exception of like the digital products and Etsy and selling on, eBay and Facebook marketplace. I don't know about Facebook marketplace and eBay. That might be like, refurbishing things or whatever. That probably wouldn't be manufacturing, I'm guessing, right? But Etsy, digital products, certainly Etsy or having an Amazon store or something like that. That's more if you're creating something, right? That's my understanding. So that's a little bit more upscale, but all these other ones are just taking the skills that you have, okay? Things that you already know how to do and just making money directly with them. So, for example, like tutoring is a popular one because the idea is that, you know something. I'm sure you know something. Even if you've never really learned any skills beyond what you did in school, you could still tutor. You could still tutor like what, you learned in school, right? There's people out there right now that are struggling with that. They're trying to pass their tests, and all this kind of stuff, and you could tutor them, right? That's the idea. So, you'll always be able to find something there, right? In theory, if some value you can deliver, right? But beyond that, think of what you know how to do. There's many ways of going about this. You could do what we're trying to do now. You could figure out, okay, what skills do I have? What do I know? Now, who out there would like to know that? Okay. Or if I have skills, like who out there could benefit from that, right? So let's say I know how to paint. I could paint a house, or I could paint a building, or I could paint a room, whatever. It doesn't have to be super, super high skilled, but, out there right now, there's people that could use someone that does painting, right? So they don't have to do it. That kind of thing. You could start with what you know and what you have. That's one way of doing it. The other way is to sort of look at what you would like to do. Maybe you don't know much about this thing, but you would like to do that. You have an ambition to do that. That would be cool. So this is like a vehicle for you to learn about that thing, right? So there you go. Get in the chat. Let me know what you guys are wondering. I'm just here babbling off the top of my head, to be honest with you. Silver Evans is here. If you do want to learn business, check out that course. More about that later. And a special shout out, as always, goes out to my YouTube channel members, right? Those people are awesome. Same with my Patreons and my super thanks donors. Don't get too many super thanks donors, but when I do, it's really awesome. I make sure that if they have a question, that I answer it thoroughly and take the time to do that. And shout out also to you guys, my participants. Thank you for being here. What is your ambition? What are you looking to do? Is this something that you kind of just have in the back of your head as one day I would like to work for myself, right? And the motivation might be more of like, I want to get away from a day job, not necessarily I'm going to something, but I just want to get away from that, Or do you have a specific ambition in mind? Let me know in the chat. I'll be happy to respond. Levi says, hey, Bill, I just landed a job last month at a city EDC. I'm not sure what that is, and I'm feeling pretty good about it. Turns out I'm around a ton of business people, and an aspect of the job is networking with them. Okay, cool, good. I'm honestly not much of a talker, especially with older people who are at least twice my age. How can I drive relevant conversations with these business people? It's very simple. Just ask them, how's business? Usually they will talk your ear off. That was my opening line for a lot of informational interviews I did back in the day, several years ago. When I was building my consulting business, I met with particularly CEOs. I pretty much almost exclusively did informational interviews with CEOs. So I met a ton of CEOs, people I didn't know, people I didn't have any connection to. And, we would either grab a coffee or I'd go to their office, and they didn't know me either. So I was meeting them for the first time. And my opening line for all those encounters, pretty much after they say, hey, good to meet you, you shake hands. Yeah. So how's business? And people would talk because it's a topic that they care about and they know lots about. And often, depending on the details, they can't share some of the answer to that question with everybody. So they keep a lot of it to themselves, and they're just bursting to talk about it, or at least to talk about as much as they can. And it's when you ask somebody about them or about some aspect of them, they find it very, very flattering that if they believe that you're genuinely interested in hearing about it, right? I mean, how often do we get that? Like, this is what I always say. How often do we get this in our lives where somebody comes up to you? Like, how often do you get this where somebody comes up to you and they say, like, wow, this thing that you do or this thing that I think is great. It's fascinating. I'd love to know what you know about that. Can you please tell me about it? And it's very flattering. Most people, their reaction is going to be like, oh, okay, yeah, sure, certainly, I got some time. It's something you enjoy talking about. It's a little bit flattering for you. It's, and here's a person who's like genuinely interested in what you think. Most people, under normal circumstances, all things being equal, will give you the time of day. They'll sit you down and they'll have a talk with you. They don't mind because they find the whole thing very flattering. And they don't get it very often. So asking them about business is usually a good thing, like their business, not business in general, but like what they do, and how's it going. And then once they say something, all you have to do is ask follow-up questions. They say, oh, I'm doing this right now and it's going this way. You go, oh, how does that work? You see, you're just like adding fuel to the fire. They go, oh, well, it works like this. And oh, how long have you been doing that? Have you done it this way? And then, you just add fuel to the fire. If they say, well, I've been doing it this long, it's like, oh, how did you get into that? Why do you do it that way instead of maybe this other way? Why is that? Right? And they'll be happy to explain. So, as long as you let them talk about their thing and you just help them in doing that, they'll talk. And that's the purpose of certainly informational interviews. You're there to learn about something from them. So it works. Levi says, Economic Development Corporation. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, I deal with so many acronyms, from people all around the world, every industry. I can't keep up. Levi says, thanks for the advice. I'm pretty fortunate to be around seasoned business people on a regular basis. I just need to get a bit more confident around them. I don't want to come off like a lost kid. I'm 23 years. Listen, Levi, it doesn't matter how old you are, how old the person is. If a sort of fresh-faced, clean-shaven, clean-cut young person comes up to them and says like, wow, listen, I'm just a student, but I aspire to either follow in your footsteps or be somewhat like you one day, I'm just trying to learn as much as I possibly can. Most people will be very understanding and very receptive to that. They'll be like, come on, my son, let me take you under my wing. Sure, I'll be happy to talk to you. What would you like to know? And they say, well, oh, how does this work? How does this industry work? What do you think is happening in this industry, or, where's it going, or, stuff like that. What do you do? How does one run this, or whatever it is that they do? And they'll be happy to sort of walk you through it. Most people, right? It's actually pretty benign talking to a young person who just wants to learn, because that they're not some mole engaged in industrial espionage. They're not some person trying to sell them something. You know what I mean? There's nothing nefarious about it. If somebody says like, oh, I'm just starting out, I'd love to be in your shoes someday, and I'm looking for any advice or anything you can tell me about how this stuff works. So anyway. So it's great to hear, Levi, that that's working out okay, and that you're prospering. And yeah, learn as much about that stuff as you can. I talk about it for what it's worth. I talk about it in this course if you wanted to go deeper into that. That also teaches you how to do networking, certainly like stuff on the hidden job market, if that's where you're at. So I have that. But, a lot of this is useful for side hustles and certainly entrepreneurship. A big skill that a lot of people, reap a lot of rewards with is knowing how to get information. So if you're starting a business, or you're trying to figure out what you could do to work for yourself, either as, a side hustle, which is what I'd recommend in the beginning, or just a full-time thing, being able to sort of insert yourself into that industry, into that business, see how it works, meet the players that are in that industry, have a dialogue with them, open these channels so you're kind of plugged in. And that's an extremely useful skill. That's how a lot of people do it, right? Doesn't mean you have to do that, but a lot of people do. Like, for example, let's say you wanted to open up a store that's in a certain industry, either in the music business or the restaurant business, something like that. Well, if you're not in the restaurant business and you want to start a restaurant, it would be pretty damn useful if you could get yourself on the inside of the restaurant business, talk to other people that run restaurants, see their operation, ask them a ton of questions, specific questions, when you're going about hiring staff, how do you do it? When you're dealing with the food wholesaler, like wherever restaurants get their food from, who are the players? How do you initiate contact with them? What do you say? What do you need? Like you're going to have a ton of specific questions, right? So being able to sort of plug yourself into that industry and go and get answers to a lot of these, is key, right? If that's what you want to do. Maybe you want to start on the small location, right? A venue. Okay. Then on top of that, on top of that, they sell a product. So they have their own special food that they're known for, right? So, you go to that restaurant or that, I guess it's called a restaurant, right? Like whether it's a coffee house or there's different types of places that sell different types of food, like a sandwich place, whatever. But you go there and you get their sort of main food product, right? And, a lot of, as I understand, a lot of the make or break of whether the restaurant works depends on how much people like their food, right? So yeah, it's like it's running a business, it's running a venue. You've got waiters and you've got the kitchen, staff like washing dishes and, preparing the food and the waiters taking it out to the table. You got that operation, right? But the real key to success is like, do people like your food? So you figure, okay, I'm going to start with the food. I don't need a physical location to just work on the food product. If I could come up with some type of food product, that people absolutely love and they can't get enough of, then I might have something. I might be able to found a restaurant and have it be a success because everybody wants to go there, not because of the service, not because of, the decor or whatever, but because of the food you get there is just awesome. And you can only get it at that restaurant. So I'm going to work on that. So I don't need a physical location. All I really need is a kitchen and, people to try out my prototype of my food product, right? So you figure, okay, I'm going to start with that. And then if I can come up with something that's like, that's a total hit, everybody who tastes it, they want more and they come back, right? And they're willing to pay for it. If I can find the formula for that, then I can proceed with, potentially opening a restaurant. Maybe there's some intermediate stages. Instead of jumping from creating a food product straight to a restaurant, I'm going to open a equivalent of like a hot dog stand or a drink stand, a lot less money to get that off the ground. It still allows you to be in business and get, some experience at being in that industry. Maybe you could go upscale more and get your food product sold in the local grocery stores, So you don't have a restaurant, but you're selling your product wholesale to, grocery stores like Sobeys and, places like that. So if you can make money at that successfully, then it's like, okay, we can ramp up and we can finally open that restaurant. So that way you don't need to go into debt at the very beginning. And as you go through these stages, it's a success before you move on to the next stage. And there's a lot of advantages with that. First of all, you're learning how everything works. Secondly, you're financing the next stage with the success of the previous stage, right? So you never actually go into debt. You're just making money the entire way through. Levi says, I'm 23 years old. Yes, I also have a business that turned into a side hustle once I got this job. I work video production and business administration. I ran it like that for a year, and the tax stuff hit me pretty bad, unfortunately. So I've been learning a lot about leadership and how to build a business correctly. It's a nice reset to have a job and rebuild the side hustle correctly. Okay. Yeah, I mean, that's a problem that a lot of people look forward to. If you're paying a ton of taxes, that means you're making a ton of money, right? So that's a good thing. All you got to do is just sort of manage that. And you can buy those services. You don't have to really get into it yourself. You can just hire the services of an accountant or a tax lawyer, and they'll be able to set all that stuff up so that it minimizes taxes and makes it easy for you and all that kind of stuff. It's not something you have to learn all the specific details of necessarily if you don't want to. Yeah, so there you go. Anyway, so something else. So get in the chat. Like, there are 21 people here. If you have questions about, side hustles or entrepreneurship, how you can start something, what you should do, that kind of stuff, I'll be happy to entertain them. You're welcome, Levi. I wish you all the best of luck. Okay, avoiding common side hustle mistakes. So this is what it says about that. Trying to do too many things at once. Yeah, I guess. Underpricing your work. Yeah. This is why it's usually good to be plugged into whatever industry you're doing. So even if you're trying to do like a store on Etsy or something, you look at what other people are charging for similar products, right? You would want to do that for several reasons, right? Number one, to avoid this, like, undercharging for your work, so you actually make a profit. Secondly, you would want to see kind of what the other competitors are doing, because you're in competition with them. If you decide to price your thing way above theirs, the only way that's going to really work is that if you have greater value that is communicated to your market, to your audience, basically your customers or potential customers. So, like getting a feel for what's out there and then thinking like, okay, they're charging this much, so I have to produce something kind of like this for around this price. Now, if I can do that, great. If I can't do that, then I might not be able to compete, with this. But sometimes it's a good thing. You discover people are charging like a lot for something that you could produce relatively cheaply. So you can decide like, okay, either I could price myself below them and, sort of get the sort of low end of the market, or I could price myself the same as them, and I wouldn't be able to sell more than them, but I would be able to have a higher profit margin, right? So one way or another, being familiar with what's going on in that business is definitely going to be a priority, right? So that's why the networking skills help if you want to do that in person. You don't necessarily have to. There's a lot of introverts out there that would rather not do that. They'd rather do research from their computer, basically stuff like that, which you can. It depends what you do. So get in the chat. There are 20 people here. If I don't get any questions, I'm probably going to wrap this down because I really don't have a ton of monologuing to do. Usually I get a bunch of people with questions. So here we go. JL Morningstar says, I'm interested in the creative arts, but I'm an accountant, and it would probably be more reasonable to go that route. That's the thing, and most people that want to do some kind of entrepreneurial venture, there isn't just one thing that they could do. They probably have several different things that they could do, right? We have several interests and several skills, right? So, for example, you say you're an accountant. Well, I'm sure you have a sort of core competency in one area of accounting, right? Just to muddy the waters even further, what you could do is you could say like, look, my main line is like this, like audit or something, or, whatever specialties there are within accounting. But I'm going to see if I can do a side hustle where I'm getting into a different area of accounting, instead of doing like audit for large businesses, I'm going to help people with their taxes or, something like that, some other area that's not my core competency. I'm going to do a side hustle there. And it may be a vehicle to round out my skills and learn that area a lot better, and use your side hustle strategically for something like that. So maybe in the future, maybe like 5-10 years down the line, you can say to yourself like, okay, now I could continue my career, my day job in accounting, doing audit for small businesses or big businesses, whatever I do. But I also have the added option of pivoting my career and going down this other direction. Let's say it was doing taxes or something, some other area of accounting that I don't usually deal with. Joining a like one of the big four, but not for accounting, doing it for tax law or tax accounting or something like that. Like some other aspect of accounting that I don't do. And it gives you some experience doing it, so you really are an authority on what to do. And you can choose to take that full time in the future, right? So that's another aspect of this, right? It doesn't have to be a complete departure. You could do the creative arts thing, and just have like a real compartmentalization between your accounting side and then this side hustle, which is like in a completely different world. If that's a hobby of yours or an interest, it might be a thing where you use it strategically to be able to do your hobby. Some people, and I know I've struggled with this, some people, their work becomes so all-encompassing that they let their hobbies die. They wish they had time to like work on hobbies and spend time with hobbies, or interests, but there's never any time. That gets pushed out of your life. So if you do a side hustle, it's kind of strategic thing where, if you make a bit of money on the side with it, great. But strategically, it's also ensuring that you are doing this in your life. It doesn't get pushed out as like something that's trivial and not essential, So there's a lot of ways of sort of rationalizing this. And I've seen a lot of people do a lot of different approaches, including things like this. So the side hustle has a sort of strategic role in your life beyond just, intrinsically it adds a revenue stream or something. It also does something else for you. Maybe it's hard to justify a certain thing in your life, but if that thing were to bring in money, then, okay, no, I'll continue doing it. It makes sense. It's easy to justify it. So there's that aspect too. Okay, there are 24 people here. Thank you for joining me today. Get in the chat. If I don't get any questions in the next like minute or two, I'll probably wrap this down. But I'm here to answer questions. Anything about side hustles, business, entrepreneurship, that kind of thing. I think it's a fascinating topic. If you want to learn business with me, check out that course, the $100 MBA, for like something like 2% of the cost of doing a brick and mortar MBA at a university that takes 2 years and it's full time. You can learn all that stuff with me. And actually what it is you're getting the same material as that you would learn in an MBA because you're getting all the same textbooks. And, you can order the textbooks that they use in some of the most prominent MBA programs in the world. You can order them off Amazon. They carry all that stuff. So if you order, you can either order the latest that they use, or you can order one that's 1 or 2 editions old and get it for like the equivalent of $5 or $10 and then read it yourself. And so that's what this is. It's sort of a self-study program where you go through all of what you would learn in an MBA. And you could do it on your terms entirely, on your schedule. You could do it depending on how many hours a week you want to commit to something like that. It's totally flexible. And what I do is I provide videos that I provide you the reading list, and then I provide you videos where I guide you through everything. So if you're interested in that, check that out. I created that course partly for entrepreneurs, people that want to learn business, but they want to do it on their own terms. They don't want to take 2 years of their life off and drop like 5 figures to have to do this. So if that's, I know for some people, that's kind of exactly what they're looking for. That fits with their goals. So if that's you, check out that course. You will not regret it. Okay, we're not getting a ton of questions. So I am going to wrap this down. I just want to make sure I said everything that I was going to say. Yeah. If you are new to this, if this is something you want to explore, this is a tremendous opportunity. You can move from working as an employee to working for yourself. And this is what a lot of people are doing. And in recent times, in the last 10 years, this has gotten a hell of a lot easier. It's become more widespread, more accepted. And, it's never been easier to do this. You know what I'm saying? So if you have an interest in doing it, I wholeheartedly encourage you. Life is long, and if you learn how to transform your value into cash directly without needing an employer, there are a lot of advantages with that. So learn all you can. I'm here every Monday, same time, talking about this. So if you have any questions, you can ask me then. And yeah, I wish you the best of luck. I'll be back next week with another edition of Side Hustle Ideas. I will be back in an hour with another live stream talking about job search and job interviews and that kind of stuff. Okay? So you guys take care. Thank you for joining me today, and I will see you soon.